And we're live. Brian, what the hell are you doing?
This video is all about standings. I thought I should stand.
Oh
I
my
don't
God.
know.
Oh. Just
You
cut.
guys clicked on the
Weak.
thumbnail. You guys know what to do. You guys can find good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you right now. Just know that you are locked in on To the Point with
Skip.
and the King. Apple, Amazon, Spotify, while you're doing dishes, changing your kids' diapers, whatever you're doing, grocery shopping, mowing the lawn, since the weather is getting better. Maybe you guys can listen to us. You might not have to watch our beautiful faces, right? Also, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which is hopefully where you're watching us. You know, you guys can help a brother out and, maybe click subscribe, leave a comment, click the bell just for any time our content comes out. And if you're still interested, maybe we can help you guys out. And thank you guys for enjoying our fantastic guests, us fantastic people, but more importantly, our fantastic guests, especially my man right there. Freddie, what's up? Can you tell the lovely ladies and gentlemen, the viewers out there, where they can find you? Because tell them how I found you, right? Because you've been doing this a lot longer than us. You've been a lot longer in the game. So can you please let them know where to find you for his great content?
Yeah, man, check me out. My personal Twitter is Freddie Rivas, FREDDIE RIVAS. My podcast is Confederacy of Dunks. Started a long time ago. We joined Raptors Republic last year, so you can check us out there on the Rapcast. I also do a WNBA podcast with my buddy Catherine Niker. She does Buckets and Tea on Raptors Republic as well, so you can check that out. WNBA podcast, the Pickup on the Sonar Network. So check me out. I'm talking ball on a regular basis, so that's the main thing you need to know about me.
I think while you're sleeping, you're talking ball. I don't know.
100%.
Just a hunch. A hunch.
Yeah, like it's like straight up. I started a podcast because I could not stop talking about the Raptors. That's the honest to God reason why I started. And also, me and my buddy, we were doing it in a storage unit for a long time. And as soon as the Raptors traded for Kyle Lowry, we ran around the storage unit where we worked screaming, "This is our Billups." And we were basically
you were right.
We were kind of right? It was like in a way he was our big shot Billups. Like I think he was his own kind of different type of legend, but like we saw him as that guy at that time.
That's awesome. That's a crazy story. Thank you, Freddie, for joining us and spending your time. We know you are short on time, so let's do this for you. Skip, what up, bro?
Not much. I'm just enjoying MLB opening day. Snuck up on me this year. I wasn't ready for it.
Surprised.
Still watching the game as soon as we get off this. So, yeah.
You should go to my dad's grave and talk to him about it.
All right.
But are you guys ready to talk some basketball? Talk some Raptors-centric basketball. I know you're born for that, Freddie. So let's get into this. The Raptors are currently slated at 9th in the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference, right? Which potentially sets them up to be playing the Chicago Bulls. But there are still 6 games left in the season, and there can be a major transition within the Eastern Conference based on injuries, based on teams tanking, based on the games, like the series, you know what I mean? Like they're tied with Atlanta, for example, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Fred, can you give us some insight currently into where the Raptors stand and where they can progress through this play-in with the last 6 games, based on also where you want them to be, where you think they can go, and what do you think would be the optimization of what they can produce on Sunday, April 9th? at the
Yeah,
culmination of it.
I mean, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. Like, I'm jacked to be here.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, where I want them to be, like, I guess, like, I'll 6 games left, so I can dip out of fantasy land, and I want them to be in 6. I want them to finish in the playoffs.
Hell, I want to be first, but
yeah, right. No, but I mean, like, it's not a mathematical impossibility yet.
Right.
Them being in 6, but I think let's just rule that out. But I think 7th is in play, especially with Miami sort of kind of, like reeling a little bit here. And we just played Miami, and I think, they were struggling, right? And obviously they're a totally different team without Jimmy, but I mean, it's crunch time, so they need Jimmy, and the fact that he's not there, that tells me he's in a lot of pain. Atlanta and the Raptors sort of have a, they're tied right now. Atlanta has the tiebreaker, 38-38. But I'm just looking at sort of tankathon here while we were getting prepped, and our strength of schedule is the 3rd hardest in the league, however you weight that, right? Knowing that we're going to play Boston and Milwaukee at the end. But Atlanta's the 7th, right? So they have a pretty hard schedule as well. And, the only team I see Atlanta playing, they're playing, I guess, the Wizards are probably the only team that is like maybe on the verge of like punting their season. And the Raptors do have those 2 Charlotte games and the Milwaukee game at the end as well. So where I think they're gonna finish, if it's like I'm putting money on it right now, I'm gonna say that the Raptors finish in 8th. Just because one of Miami or Atlanta, I think, whether it's Miami kind of tidying up some stuff and finishing a bit stronger than they've looked, will finish in 7th, or maybe Atlanta, similarly sort of like has some decent games and they tie with us. Record wise, 6 games. The Raptors, I've just not proved to be a consistent enough team. So I think saying they win 3 games and lose 3, if I was a bettor, I'd probably say that. Even if it might be something weird, right? Like we might win a game in Boston and like lose a game in Charlotte. Like, I think these are the Raptors we know this year. And, like there's any given night, they can just go ice cold from 3 or, something of that nature and just be a little bit unpredictable. I mean, as far as like what it means in general for the year, I think, it's honestly been, out of all the years I've done a podcast, this has been the single most confusing Raptors team I can ever remember. And I chalk a lot of that up to chemistry. I think there's lots of sort of like subplots going on. The growth of Scotty mixed in with like the kind of like veteran bulldog of Fred. This year you saw a lot of Fred versus Scotty. And I think that came from somewhere, like not just like, angry fans. Like I think that came from some type of power struggle, right? But I also think that those two have played better together and with Pirtle. So their roles have defined themselves a lot more. We've also seen OG recently just be like, you know what? I don't need to occupy the middle of the floor that much. I'll jack up 10 threes and I can shoot. And Pascal, we've seen Pascal be, a Robin. We've seen him be, part of a bench mob. Like we've seen Pascal be malleable. And I think we're seeing that too. So yeah, I'm excited. I was just saying, before we recorded, like I'm really excited for a lot of different reasons. Like whatever happens this summer, we are now in the opportunity, or like where we as fans get to see all these guys that we're not sure about, this team that we're not sure about, be in a really high leverage situation. So it's going to be like, hey, show up.
We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that later. We're going to get into that later. We're going to get into that later. Now, based on the Raptors like being slated into the play-in tournament, right? You mentioned some things there, which I will get into. But Skip, if you were in the front office for the Toronto Raptors, or if you were a player, shout out Sean McCaw, if you were to be in there, what team would you like to play? Because you and I talked about this earlier, Skip. The Raptors would have to go where they're currently slated. They would have to go 2-0 to make it in, correct?
Yeah, if they're the 9 seed, they have to beat Chicago and then beat whoever
The
loses the
winner
other game.
between
Yeah,
Atlanta and
the
Miami.
loser, the loser. But yes,
For the loser. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes. So they would currently have to go 2-0, but if they were to, just to Fred's point, if they were to make it to the 8th slot, they'd have to go 1-1. Right?
if they were,
am I wrong?
no. If they stay in the 9 spot, they have to go 1-1. If they make it to the 8 spot, they just have to win one game.
Okay. So what team would you like to see them play against in the playoffs?
Well, I mean, obviously, in theory, I think the ideal team to play against would be Brooklyn, because that means you made it up to the 8th spot. That means Brooklyn fell off to the 7th spot. Brooklyn obviously is a less scary team on paper than Miami is. I think they obviously don't have the name value. They've got some nice young pieces, but they've obviously, a lot of those wins were built up earlier in the season when they had KD. I think they're definitely a team that you go into that game and you're like, we can beat these guys. We can knock these guys off. I think Miami is pretty beatable too, though, to be frank. I think Jimmy obviously changes the equation a little bit, but I thought the most interesting thing about that game the other night was the Raptors were like, no Jimmy, I get that, no Gary Trent, not an equal trade-off. But the Raptors were like 2 for 20 from 3 at one point, and they still had like a 13-point lead. And you just do like some quick math there. You go 6 for 20, that's a 30-point game. So that's like, that felt like a game that the Raptors just completely dominated, completely controlled. And obviously Jimmy can change some of that, but that Miami Heat team just doesn't scare me. They look quite beatable. They've got pieces all over the place that are kind of useful, kind of past their prime. They're just not, they're not the Heat that you kind of think of in your mind when you build up the Heat as this consistent contender, fringe contender. This is a team that's kind of in a transitional phase that's probably, there's a reason they're right where the Raptors are, right in the standings. And if I'm just going to look real quick here, but I believe out of all of those 3 teams, the Raptors might actually have the best point differential. Let me just double check here. Yeah, the Raptors have a 1.2 point differential. The Heat actually have a negative point differential, and the Nets are plus 0.7. But a lot of that, again, is with KD in the lineup. So I think of those 3 teams, the Raptors can easily beat those teams. I think obviously if you're in the 9 seed, you got to play Chicago. Chicago actually is a better point differential than those teams. I'd really rather not be in that 9-10 matchup for multiple reasons. I think the Raptors, as they're currently constituted, they can beat any of those teams. They can beat Chicago, but you want to win one game. You want to just have to win one game. And I think absolutely there's no reason that the Raptors should be scared of anybody. I think they should put themselves in the best position. And again, like to that 8-9 point, I think to what Freddie was talking about, I think 7 is out of the question. I think 10 is basically out of the question. I mean, they're mathematically possible still, but 6 games left in the season, your spot is pretty much your spot. I think it's just going to be a straight up race between Toronto and Atlanta right now, and whoever finishes out the year strong, right? And I think the Raptors are the team that looks better. But again, it's tough with this schedule. If Philly's playing their full complement, if Boston's playing their full complement, it's going to be tough. Now, if someone throws us a game here or there, that sort of might swing the balance in our favor. I think the Raptors are going to have to come out and they're going to have to do their best and just try to get that 8th seed by whatever means necessary. And if they don't, then I'm still confident against Chicago.
May I weigh in here, guys?
Get in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's multiple things you guys have said. Like, we've spoken about the schedule. Obviously, Toronto's got to play against Philly as of this recording, which will be Friday night. They got to play Charlotte twice. They got to play Boston twice in Boston, both times. Then they close out the season against Milwaukee. Atlanta, Skip, you were saying about them chasing Atlanta. Basically, that's the race. They got to play in Brooklyn, right? They got to play against Dallas. They got to play against Chicago, which can help the Toronto Raptors, right? If they do lose. Then they also got to play against Washington. That might be a wash game. Then they got to play against Philly. Then they got to close out the season against Boston, right? In Boston, which is going to be tough for them. Maybe Boston might be resting some of their guys, but there's also
Oh, that's actually
I'm
interesting. So they're playing Boston the same time we're playing Milwaukee. So those two teams might both be resting, eh?
yes,
That's an interesting little wrinkle.
Mhm.
yes. But here's what, Skip. You know I love to go with the wild card and go with some crazy business. Here's the other thing too. The New York Knicks today said that Julius Randle is out for the next 2 weeks. The Raptors are currently 6 games behind New York, which is sitting in fifth. You just said it, Freddie. You just said it. It's mathematically possible, highly improbable.
Can I just stop you right there and say no?
Yeah,
Not
obviously,
gonna
that's
happen.
why I said highly improbable, bro. But then also again, Brooklyn with their full like tank mode kind of thing, like only thing keeping them their heads above water is Mikal Bridges, right? We all can see that. But when you look at their schedule, they're playing also against Atlanta. Let's root for Brooklyn on that one. They're playing against Utah. Who knows? They're playing against Minnesota. Minnesota's still striving. Cat ain't quitting, right? They're playing against Detroit. Right? They're playing against Orlando, and they're closing out the season against Philly.
Sorry, who's
Now,
this? This is
Miami,
Brooklyn's schedule?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Now Miami only has 5 games left. Out of all 6 teams that I've just mentioned, except for Chicago, right? Out of all 6 teams, Miami only has 5 games left, right? As opposed to the 6 from the other team, right? So there can be a discrepancy. Maybe there can be a jump. Maybe there could be a change because there's a lot of interchangeable parts when you look at the schedule and all these teams are playing. Like even Chicago was playing Charlotte, like the Raptors did. They're playing Milwaukee. They're playing Dallas, right?
Yeah,
They're
so
also
Brian, let
playing
me just cut you off right there. So basically all those
What?
other teams have easier schedules than the Raptors and the Hawks.
Yes,
So
like Fred said
yeah,
earlier, and you and I spoke about earlier, the Raptors have the third toughest schedule to close out
yeah.
the season.
Mhm.
Now, how much hope does that give you? Because we can clearly see that some of these other teams might not be able to like surpass expectations from what they're given. But the Raptors do have that, like you said earlier, Fred, to allude on that, they do have that tenacity. And like you said, building on the chemistry and the way the team is going, what do you guys think about the Raptors going into the playoffs? Because let's face it, they're going into the playoffs. What do you guys think? Fred, floor is yours, my man.
Let me just clarify. Like, are you saying like, are we assuming they get through the play-in, like in the playoffs?
I would think so.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, just for the sake of this question, like, yeah, like so, right? Like they get in. They play. I think at this point it's sort of looking like, probably like the Bucks Celtics. Maybe there's a off chance the Sixers pass the Celtics. But yeah, I think the easy answer is, like they're gonna lose. But I think the more interesting answer to me is, they're playing. To me, it's like it's team by team, and I think we're in such a matchup driven league that let's say they play the Bucks. I think the Raptors have this kind of weird relationship with the Bucks where we sort of match up well, but it also doesn't matter because their talent is kind of overwhelming. But it's like you got to play the games sort of thing. And I'm not saying the Raptors are going to be in a we believe Warrior scenario, but the Raptors play the Bucks, and if it's 6 games, I think that's sort of a victory, right? Like I think they end the season well, are somewhat competitive. The Raptors play this. Sorry,
I said I concur.
Yeah, like so, but I mean, like, yeah, like I don't want to. Short of some like wild injury, like I think that's sort of what we're looking at. And then with the like, if
not naming any names, Giannis.
I know, right? Like, but I mean, we've already seen Giannis like bend his knee backwards and then win a championship. So
yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know.
But like the Celtics are really interesting to me because I feel like I'm not even going to get into the like, oh, maybe they're playing poorly, because it's like whatever. They're a whole class above the Raptors. But since the bubble, they in my opinion were the first team to really expose this over aggressive Raptors defense. I remember watching them in the bubble being like, wow, Marcus Smart is hitting all these threes. And then the subsequent years, how many role players have we seen dominate the Raptors? Our scheme gives up good shots to teams that like move the ball well. So I think that series really interests me from a Nurse perspective. I'm like,
that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that coaching has to be involved into that? There has to be
100%. Like, I feel like if Nurse has something that we haven't seen, if Nurse can surprise Boston, then I think like I'm not saying like an upset's really in play there, but I feel like the difference between like a competitive 6 or like a sweep or a dominant 5 or whatever, I think that really it's going to show us a lot. And yeah, we're also going to see who shows up and how individually and chemistry wise in the playoffs. And this is going to be a bit of a wild take, but
bring it.
You know, if we play Philly, I don't know. I think anything's possible. Not just because of James Harden, but also I feel like, you know, Embiid's never made the conference finals, and I think that like the Sixers have this sort of, I don't know. They
don't we all want to see Embiid cry again?
I'd love it. You know, we've seen them collapse. There's this rivalry. Again, I think even a competitive 6 against the Sixers would be great. They're the obvious favorite, you know, but you think back to last year, Scotty gets injured in the first game. Trent's got the flu. OG playing with a broken finger. Fred, his hip is just like dust. All that said, Philly's better than they were last year. So, I mean, I've been going on too long here. Like,
and the Raptors are worse. Yeah.
The Raptors are worse. Yeah.
I talked myself into that series last year. I really believed. I was like, we're the underdog, but we have a shot to take this series. And it just, like you said, it kind of just didn't matter. But I do think that kind of something what you're saying, not so much with the matchups, because I think those are interesting on their own right, but we'll get into that maybe later if they end up advancing to face one of those teams. But I think this concept of the play-in, right? Because for a while I've been kind of iffy on the play-in, like, well, who cares who makes it in? They're going to get curb stomped in the first round. We know this. But I think the idea is now that team that goes up against your Philly, your Boston, Milwaukee, that's going to be whatever team got their you-know-what together at the end of the season. And what we're seeing with this Raptors team is they're a team that's getting their stuff together now. They're not, their record might not necessarily show it, because I think they've kind of had a tough schedule up to this point. They've had some tough losses in there, but I think we're really seeing a team that's found themselves, that kind of has found a system that kind of works. They don't have much margin for error. I mean, when a couple guys are out and they got to throw out like Jeff Dowtin against, was it Indy, the game we lost recently? Yeah. So like, there's not a lot of margin for error once you have to dip into that bench. But if they're playing their top 7 guys, I think they've really found a system that works. And going into the playoffs, you can maybe see a team that can make a run at a Milwaukee, make a run at a Boston, a Philly. But I think what's kind of interesting about that, you'll think back to that Milwaukee game where the Raptors put up such a great fight, and it was such a great game. But it was also like there were magical shots. They were making crazy fadeaways. They were making like Fred VanVleet went off on those shots are not going to be there every game. Like those shots are going to miss a lot. And I think one thing that's kind of interesting is you always want to look at degree of difficulty of your scoring, right? Because like anyone can hit some shots. Are you getting easy shots is really kind of the way to win consistently. Yeah. And so I think that's why the Raptors probably won't be able to advance against any of these teams, because they don't get easy shots. They don't convert easy shots. They don't do these things that you need to do in the playoffs. So I think they still will get run down. But I think as compared to like the other play-in teams, I think they might be kind of the most punchy of the play-in teams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Guys, Skip, you just said it. You just sparked something in my head. Dowtin, since we're on this topic. Dowtin.
Well, I was throwing him under the bus, but it's no offense, Dowtin. It's like, look, Dowtin is great. He's a great replacement level player, but that's all he is.
If the Raptors are going to keep him, they got to waive somebody. Now, if you were in the front office, Fred, I'll ask you first. If you were in the front office, who would you waive to keep Dowtin? Sorry, guys, this is off script. I'm just throwing this out you.
It's fine.
Because Skip just said something.
I think Wieskamp's the obvious choice for me, just because he came in, hit a bunch of shots, then he got benched for a bit after he hit those shots, but then he came back later and missed a bunch of shots. I don't know. He doesn't seem like he is being used or nurse, like, I don't know, knows how. I don't know what the deal is there. It's just one of those weird nurse things. So
he got replaced. That's what happened.
Yeah, he got replaced, right? And I think Dowtin clearly has more value. I think Barton's not going to get released.
Sorry, I don't know when this is going to come out, but has it been confirmed that Barton's healthy? I don't know what the situation is with his leg.
Yeah, he sprained his ankle, right? But yeah, I don't know what his health is like either. But I feel like, with all the sort of like piling on Dowtin's or Barton's play, I think some people have sort of forgot, like, the Raptors weren't the only team after Barton. Like, a lot of people were interested in his services, and obviously he struggled in Washington and he struggled to shoot well here, but I think like a veteran who can handle the ball to some degree has a lot of value on this team. And Dowtin's 25, right? So I think he's even bringing some of that composure. Like, he's played in a lot of different scenarios. So but yeah, I think replacement level player is key. Like, it's
maybe it adds a little bit. Maybe it adds a little bit into the locker room with veteran leadership. Someone that's been there, done that.
I'm a big believer in that. Like, I think having guys like Haslam or Young or Barton or whatever, like that, it adds value.
Skip, who do you think they should waive if they want to keep Dowtin?
Well, I do think if Barton's ankle injury is at all serious, then it might make sense just to move on from him, because there's only 6 games left in the season. I think probably Wieskamp is the other one. The other option, I guess, would be Thaddeus Young, but I don't really know how that works with contract buyout scenarios, because they would have to buy out his contract next year. So I don't know exactly how that goes against the books. They're probably going to buy it out anyway. I just don't know the financials of it specifically. But yeah, probably a Wieskamp or a Barton is what you're looking at, I would guess. It'd be interesting. I think they probably will have to add him to the roster at some point. So, yeah, it might be bought by Wieskamp.
He's played his way in, it seems.
Yeah.
I think that would be good to have like a Torontonian, join the team, be there for us. My pick was Thad Young.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why you said Torontonian, but the other guy we haven't really talked about is Banton. I mean, Banton, I know he's been hurt most of the year, but he's really
he's
kind of
been
disappeared. So
even he hasn't even been playing for the 905. So like, he might what is his injury update like?
Yeah, he's definitely hurt, but I just don't know how serious it is. I don't know how much the team really still believes in him. It seemed like he fell off the depth chart, but some of that was injuries, so it's hard to say where they value him right now.
Yeah, we see him sitting there in street clothes.
Yeah.
Or not even street clothes, wearing a Raptors hoodie and whatever on the bench during the home games, right? Hopefully we see him during the last game, since the Raps are going to be on the road. Hopefully we see him back at some point. But he's also been on the 905. Fred, thank you very much. Can you plug yourself one more time?
Yeah, for sure. Confederacy of Dunks. The Pickup at WNBA podcast, and you can check me out on socials. Freddie Noel Rivas. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you very much. Skip, do they know where to find you?
Yeah, same place as always. Dougie J's on Twitter.
All right, guys. So on behalf of myself, Freddie, and Skipper, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, and
peace.